Hello and welcome to the Alpha Male 2.0 podcast. I am Caleb Jones, Alpha Male 2.0, dating multiple attractive women all at the same time without any cheating or lying or drama, while having location-independent income, freedom-focused lifestyle design for men. If you were not aware, I have another podcast called the Sovereign CEO Podcast, where I focus on location-independent income, living abroad, business, marketing, things of that nature. And if you are interested in listening to that podcast, because they both come out once a week in addition to this podcast, that is at calebjones.com/podcast. And I'm on all the usual podcast platforms. This is kind of an unofficial installment in probably an unofficial series of podcasts I'm doing on my dating history. A lot of you guys really like to hear about when I was a beta male and kind of where I came from and why I made changes in my life. And I've done two of these podcasts now where I talk about dating experience as a beta male. And in this podcast, I'm going to talk about when I was married, my first marriage as a monogamous beta male, what happened there, why it didn't work, and why I made the changes that I made. Some of you requested this, and knowing my history with this stuff, how much you guys like this stuff, I'm happy to talk about it. So leading up to my marriage, let's start at the beginning. I met her the way I met most women back when I was a young beta male in his early 20s. I worked with my ex-wife at a client company I was working with, and she was cute, she was blonde, she had a big ass, everything daddy likes. And we were working on a project. I was working with her for about 2-3 weeks in an office, and she was kind of aggressive. Literally, after 2 or 3 days of me working there, and I just met her 2 or 3 days prior, she was like literally just sitting on the desk I was working on, and she's like flipping her hair. She's like, "So, I don't have a boyfriend." No. She said, "Yeah." She said, "I don't have a boyfriend. Do you have a girlfriend?" I mean, it's pretty aggressive. I'm like, "Nope." And I went, "Okay, I'm probably hitting this." Even as a beta male, like, "Oh, that's pretty obvious." All right. Now, one thing is that she was 6 years older than me. So I believe this is a long time ago. I might be getting the details wrong. I believe when we met, she was 30 or 31 and I was 24. Right. So she already had a son, and that was Josh, who became my son. When we got married, I adopted him, and he still remained my son after the divorce. And he was about 4 years old at the time. And so at the end of that project, I was nervous, but I asked her out on a date, and she said an enthusiastic yes. And we went out to some, dive bar restaurant place, and we talked for a little bit, had dinner, and then we both met back in the parking lot where the client office was, because we both knew where that was. And if I remember right, we were both sitting in my car. I drove a Nissan 300ZX back then. This was timing. This was 1995 or 6? 1996, maybe 96. My memory is hazy. This is a long time ago. And I start making out with her, and my hands are all over her, and I want to have sex with her. She says no. But then the very next time we met up, we went to another cheapy little restaurant, and we went back to her apartment and had sex. So I literally had sex on the second date. And she was already pretty motivated. It's not like I had to work very hard. And that's kind of how this works if you're a beta male. Beta males get laid with women who are already the pump is already primed. The girls already kind of like him, or the girl's already really horny, because beta males don't have a lot of game. And I wasn't horrible, but I have nowhere near where I am now. And so that's just kind of how it worked. We dated for a few months. Finally, she asked to move in with me, and I was dumb, and I said yes. And then we got married. I think, within 5 months of meeting each other. 6 months. Red flag number one. Very common mistake men make, and I made that when I was a kid. You don't marry a woman after meeting her for 4 or 5 months. That is insane. What you do instead, the OLTR model is, you date a woman as an MLTR for at least 6 months with minimal or zero problems. Then you have the OLTR talk. If she survives that talk, and that's the talk where you say, not only you won't be monogamous, but you give her all the negatives of her actually being your girlfriend or a long-term wife. You give her the negatives. If she survives that talk, then you very carefully upgrade her to OLTR. Then you see her for another 6 months to a year. And then if you're still good, then you move in with her if you want. which is about the model I follow with Pink Firefly, by the way, if you want to contrast. Pink Firefly was an FB for a year. Then we didn't see each other much for about a year. Then she was an MLTR for about 6 months. OLTR talk upgraded her to OLTR. Dated as an OLTR girlfriend for like a year and a half, I think. And then she moved in. So I was, seeing her in some form or fashion for 3 or 4 years before she moved in. That is the appropriate way to do this. But if you're young and stupid and a beta male, you move right in because you're stupid and you're desperate. So we lived together in my first real house. I lived in a condo for a while. She moved her son in. She very quickly became pregnant with my daughter, Alyssa. And one of the things I do remember, again, this is all haze, this is so long ago, but we had a lot of sex for standard marriage, standard monogamous marriage. We had a lot of sex in the first few months. And then within about, let's see, my memory is that she moved in October, and by February, she started saying no to sex. And I was completely confused. Oh, I was so dumb. Oh my God, young, dumb, inexperienced beta male. I was completely floored. I'm like, why is she saying no? That doesn't make any sense. We just got married. What the hell? This is really weird. Why would she possibly say no to sex? That didn't make any sense to me. Little did I know she was following the standard pattern of standard female biology. Now, I'm not trying to say that if you get into a monogamous relationship, she'll start saying no to sex within 4 or 5 months. Some women take 2 or 3 years. I've talked about with most women, it's 3 years. 3 years, and then all the problems of monogamy start showing, if not before 3 years. She just happened to do it sooner. So we were married for a total of 9 years. And the first few years were okay. They weren't bad. They weren't good. They were just kind of there. We were just kind of there. We were raising kids. And often when you have children, it artificially extends a bad marriage because you don't want to get divorced because for the good of the kids. I know she was thinking that. I'll talk about that in a minute. I was somewhat thinking that. I wasn't thinking about getting divorced the first few years because I was okay. We got along okay. And when I mean okay, as I literally mean okay, I wasn't super attracted to her. She definitely wasn't super attracted to me. We didn't hate each other. We did irritate each other. I irritated her more than she irritated me. I definitely know that. We got along because she was able to give me space. So those are one of the good things about her, is that I would work all day and work all night, and she would just let me do it. Very different than Pink Firefly today, who feels lonely and wants to spend more time with me. But my first wife was the opposite of that. And I could do things like later in the marriage, I could say like, I could go to my wife at the time, my first wife, and say, hey, I'm going to Hong Kong for a week. And she'd say, okay, have fun. I'm like, ooh, that's cool. That's awesome. She doesn't care. Most wives aren't going to let their husbands do that, especially monogamous wives, because that's what she was. But she gave me my space. And she was also congruent with, hey, I want a nicer car. So Caleb, go work so we can make more money so I can get a nicer car. She was congruent in that respect. Another advantage of her was that she was extremely domesticated. I've mentioned this before. She was an amazingly good cook. She was a, damn near a professional level chef. The food that she would make us for dinner was as good as a nice restaurant. So when she made lasagna, it'd be like going to a fancy Italian restaurant and ordering lasagna there. It was that good. She used to make pizza, homemade pizza, but from scratch. I mean, from scratch. She'd make the dough. She'd buy all the things. She would never go to the store and buy a frozen pizza. She'd be like, oh, that's disgusting. I want to make it. I want to make the good pizza. And the pizza she made was fucking amazing. It was every bit as good as your favorite pizza restaurant. It was awesome. And she was very good aesthetically. She knew how to decorate the house and fix things around the house, which I'm not that great. I'm okay with that stuff, but I'm not great. I'm better at business type stuff. And so I've talked about this before, we were complementary, but we were not compatible. Well, is that the same thing? No, it's not. Complementary means the ways in which you're different complement each other. So I was good with business, numbers, money. She was good with homes, logistics, raising kids, the home logistics of those things. So we were very complementary that way. We were not compatible at all. I like little girly girls. She was very masculine. She was very tough. I like women who like to have a lot of sex. She hated having sex once she got past those first few months. For most of our entire marriage, those 9 years, the pattern we fell into was, I think I've mentioned this before, we had sex once a week when she wasn't having her period. This was the pattern. I don't know how long it took for us to develop this pattern, but that was the pattern. So I could have sex with her once a week, shoot me in the fucking face. But if she was on her period, sex wasn't allowed. So basically, I had sex 3 times a month. And I hated it. It drove me insane. That was very painful for me. I did not cheat during the marriage, although I wanted to. There were several scenarios where I could have through clients at work, women I met through my work. And I didn't do it not because I'm honorable or moral. It's because I just have this wiring. If I promise to do something, I have to do it. So I'm very logical about this. I said, well, I promised her I wouldn't have sex with other women, so I can't. And if I want to, I can't. I want to, and boy, did I want to bad. Boy, did I have a lot of thoughts. And I flirted with women at work. I did a lot of that, but I never touched any, and I wanted to, and I could have. I'm thinking now 2 women in particular back then who I could have had sex with. I could have had an affair. I could have done it, but I didn't, but it was hard. I mean, I've given the analogy before of men in these monogamous marriages who aren't getting laid enough or aren't getting laid at all, and they walk around with their teeth clenched, and their fists are both like, oh, I'm really happy. Yeah, I love my wife. Oh, I love my life. That was me. And I remember having discussions with my first wife at the time where I would complain about this 3 times a month thing. And this is where it gets really bad. She would go talk to this is what wives do. She would go talk to other wives, her girlfriends in the neighborhood who are married to their beta male husbands. And amazingly, I remember her saying this. These women would tell her, this is what they would say. This is how bad monogamy is, guys, for you guys who are stupid enough to get involved in a long-term monogamous relationship or marriage. These women would tell her, he's complaining about 3 times a month? You're fucking your husband 3 times a month and he's complaining? Holy shit, he should be thanking you. Are you kidding me? He should be lucky. I fuck my husband once every 6 months. Or I fuck my husband once on Valentine's Day and once on his birthday. Or I have my sex with him maybe once every 6 weeks. 3 times a month, and your asshole, greedy, shitty husband, that Caleb guy, is complaining about 3 times a month? What a prick. So women would tell her this over and over again. And that would just bolster her point. She'd come back and say, I talked to a bunch of women. And they said, you should be thankful that I'm fucking you 3 times a month. Welcome to monogamy, folks. I can't believe Ben still agreed to this. This is insanity. Anyway, so that was that aspect of the marriage. My marriage, again, my first marriage, first years were okay. We had a good family experience. I'm trying to give you the pros and the cons. We had a good family experience. So we would do things as a family together. It was the 4 of us, me, my ex-wife, my daughter Alyssa, and my son Josh. And we would do stuff. And I liked being a dad. I wanted children. I'm glad I had children. That was a big part of my life. I loved my kids. I loved spending time with my kids. They were very important to me. We had a good family experience. And to her credit, she was good at the mom logistics of taking care of the kids and getting them off to school and getting them to practice and feeding them and dealing with the teachers. She was very, very good at that. She wasn't exactly a super loving mother. I'm not going to say too much about that. You can talk about kids about that if you want. But she was good with the mom logistics. But she was one of these typical married, monogamous women who wanted the benefits of being married to a man without putting into the effort in terms of being a wife. So she was, and there are a lot of married women like this. They're perfectly willing to put in the time and effort to be a mom. They are not willing to put in the time and effort to be a wife. They think that's offensive. And if you say, like, I have to have more sex with you, the standard thing, I'm not your hooker. I'm not your whore. It's not my job to fuck you. By the way, that is the opposite of the truth. If you are a woman in a monogamous live-in relationship, it is your job to fuck your husband or boyfriend as much as he likes. Because if you don't do that, your marriage will fail. Either you will end up getting divorced because he can't stand it, or he will go fuck the secretary and you'll find out and then you'll get divorced. So I'm sorry, women. Sorry, ladies. If you're in a monogamous, okay, my wife isn't monogamous. We're not monogamous. She doesn't have this issue. But if you're in a monogamous marriage, it is your fucking job to suck his dick. I'm sorry. If you want to do that, get ready for an affair. I mean, I've talked about this before where a woman, like a public figure, will come out and say, my husband cheated on me. What a horrible person. Or some woman will go on some forum. My husband cheated on me. What a piece of shit. And every time I'm able to do this, I ask these women, how many times a week were you and your husband having sex? And every time The answer is fuck you, or it's, here's one that I get a lot. What does that have to do with it? Aha. That has everything to do with it, sweetheart. If you were having sex 2, 3, 4 times a week, I doubt very much it would have cheated on you. It's still possible, depends the guy. But the odds would have been much, 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 much lower. And so if you say, I have sex with my husband twice a year, and then you're shocked when he cheats on you, you're a dumbass. That's your fault. Or at least you're a direct contributor to that problem. Toward the end of the marriage, things started getting worse. And let's see. It's hard to remember specifics of so long ago, and I never really think about this stuff. Toward the very end, she stopped having sex with me, and I went through 6 months, 6 or 7 months without having any sex, the longest I've ever been in my life, not having sex. And I remember that like people I worked with would say, Caleb, what's wrong? You okay? You're walking around like a zombie. I'm like, man, I haven't had sex in 6 months. I didn't say that, but that was why. Around the time she turned 40, well, actually a little before that, she started talking about, I have depression. And I need to go get drugs because I have depression. We would actually both joke about it. I'm like, okay. Clinical depression is not something I understand very well. That could be a whole podcast in and of itself. Yes, I believe depression is real, but I think it is overdiagnosed. My same opinion about ADHD and things like that. Anyway, she started taking antidepressant pills. Not good. These pills made her worse. And also, either coincidentally or not coincidentally, around age 40, she went through premature menopause. And a lot of women just go crazy when that happens. And so that made her even more angry, more erratic. She was already very angry. She was an angry person. She was not very friendly. Many times throughout our marriage, this is true, we would meet other people, like she would meet like other couples I worked with or things like that. Or we would go to the zoo and I'd see a friend of mine with his wife or a woman I work with her husband or whatever. And later they would say, why does your wife look so angry? And that was her demeanor. She'd have this angry look on her face all the time. She wasn't a very happy person. My fault. I married an unhappy person. Don't marry unhappy people. It was stupid. She started getting more and more angry, and I started having scenarios where I would work. I had a home office back then. I still remember this. My daughter, and she was very little at the time. She's like 6, 7 years old. She would come into my office crying, and I'd say, what's wrong? And she would say, Mom is smashing pans in the kitchen again. And I'd be like, oh, God. So I'd have to have talks with my first wife about, look, if you're gonna get pissed off, will you please do it not in front of the children? Will you please go out go outside or go in the garage? Another rule I tried to enforce unsuccessfully with her is if you want to have an argument, we had arguments all the time. Well, let's talk about that. We had arguments all the time. I said, let's do it not in front of the kids because I know the psychological damage that causes to kids. You can't do that. Let's go out to the garage. Let's go outside. Let's go far away from the kids. And then you can argue all you want. And yes, we argued regularly all the time. It was a normal part of the marriage, as it is with most traditional monogamous marriage. Regular, big, long arguments. They're the standard with most monogamous people I know. You just argue all the fucking time, and they go on and on. And like most married couples, we would argue for a long time, 45 minutes plus. And if you've ever been in a relationship like this, or maybe you are in a relationship like this, you know how this works. You argue, you scream and yell at each other for like 45 minutes or an hour. You both go away and nothing's resolved and you're still just as angry, if not more angry at the other person. So you have all these arguments literally for no reason. You're just venting. And I didn't know how to relate to women. I didn't know how to communicate to women. I used logic, which is not what you're supposed to do when you're dating a woman or in a marriage with a woman in a romantic relationship context. When she's mad at you and you use logic, all you're gonna do is just piss her off even more. You just nod your head and agree, validate her emotions and all that stuff. I didn't know how to do any of that. So again, all this is my fault. I would have never made any of these mistakes today. I would have married her today. But that came to a head where she got violent. I don't want to get into specifics because I don't want to talk about her personal life. Oh, this was like, Jesus, almost 20 years ago now. She got violent, physical with me, violent with me once. And I said, basically, look, I don't remember exactly what I said, but I said something to the effect of, look, I love you, because I still loved her at that point, even though the marriage was terrible. I still technically loved her. I said, I love you. I want to be with you forever. I want to be with the kids. And so, look, I'll make anything work. You can fuck other guys, and I'll still be with you. You can go rob a bank. I'll still be with you. You can get drunk and do drugs. I'll still be with you. I won't be very happy, but I'll hang in there because I don't want to get divorced. I said, however, if you're physically violent against me, that's the one thing I can't make work, because here's what's going to happen. I knew all this back in the 90s. Or no, when was this? This was the aughts, late aughts, 2005, 6, 7, somewhere in there. I said, look, the way this works is you're going to get violent with me. I'm going to defend myself. The police are going to show up and they're not going to take you to jail. You're the girl. They're going to take me. I can't be a dad of my children if I'm sitting in jail because my wife got physically violent with me. I'm not going to play that game. I said, so we need to do whatever we need to do. I will go to marriage counseling with you. I will go to anger management. I will go to couples. I'll do whatever you need to do, but you can't get violent with me ever again. And I said at the time, I said, if it ever happens again, if it happens a second time, there will never be a third time. I just left it at that. I didn't say I'm going to divorce you. I just said there will never be a third time if there's a second time. And she's like, she's screaming, yell. We did go to marriage counseling. We did do that. It was way too late. We were both way too gone, both of us, me and her. I was already kind of checked out mentally. She was too. She basically revealed to me at that time that, I may have mentioned this before, that her thing was she wanted to stay married until the kids grew up and left the house, then get divorced. And I said, wait a minute, our kids are little. I mean, my daughter was like 7, 8 years old. You want me to suffer through this another 10 to 15 years and then get divorced? A divorce 10 to 15 years from now would be 10 times, 100 times worse for me than one now. Are you insane? Not to mention the fact that our children will have to watch us hate each other for the next 10 to 15 years. You don't think that will have a negative effect on their growth and their happiness as adults? That doesn't make any fucking sense. But that's what she really wanted. Yeah, I'm going to go make a bunch of money and then you're going to take half of it. None of it made any sense to me. It was insane. But that's what she wanted. So, I don't remember the time frame exactly. 6 weeks later, maybe 2-3 months later, I forget. We were talking about something useless, and she got violent again. And it was worse the second time. Now, to be clear, it's not like she took a knife and came out with a knife. It's not like she beat the shit out of me. It was minor violence, but it was physical violence. There were scratches on my arms and scratches on my face. And so knowing the laws in the United States and Canada, and by the way, be aware of this, if you live with a woman and she physically assaults you, don't fight back. You will go straight to prison. They will not listen to a single word about who started or any of that crap. That's not how this works. Family law favors women. That's just how this works. It's the age of overcorrection in which we live right now. And I knew this. So I just, blocked and took it like a man. I didn't punch. I didn't shove her. I wanted to, but I didn't. I just took it. And it was in my office. As soon as she left, literally, I pulled out my digital camera and snapped pictures of my scratches on my arms, the scratches on my face, and kept them. And I was out of the house within 48 hours because I mean what I say. And so I remember this day. I may have described this before in a distant old podcast, but I had some money set aside for an emergency. I rented an apartment immediately, got the movers, and I had to time it. So when I knew she was going to be gone for 5 or 6 hours in the middle of the day. And so she was gone, got the movers over. We loaded up that truck as soon as we could, as fast as we could. I remember the night before packing up all my stuff in boxes, hoping she wouldn't walk in, and she didn't. And I was out of the house. And that was within 48 hours. Stayed in an apartment for a while. And divorce proceedings began later. But that was it. And I could talk more about my divorce, I guess, in a future podcast. You want me to go into details about that? But that is that 9-year bad relationship in a nutshell. I'm going to say this again. 100% of this was my fault. I follow a concept called everything in your life is your fault, because it is. And what most men do when they talk about their goddamn ex-wives is they blame the ex-wife. She's a demon. She's from hell. She's a bitch. She's a cunt. Fuck her, that fucking bitch. You will notice that whenever I talk about my first wife, whenever I don't talk about her often, but when I do, when the topic comes up, often because you guys request it, I don't do that. I keep it, I state the facts, and that's it. You know why? It wasn't her fault, it was mine. I didn't have to marry her. I could have said no. I could have just dated her, had fun, and then we would have broken up in a few months, and I would have moved on. Would have been fine. I could have handled the marriage better. I could have learned how to communicate with women better during the marriage. I could have opened up the marriage By the way, we had that discussion. A lot of guys seem to think that I broke up from my first wife because I tried to get it non-monogamous and she said no. That didn't happen. As a matter of fact, she was actually open to it. Toward the end of the relationship, she would start half joking about, there was like this cute blonde girl, this blonde married woman in our neighborhood. And she's like, I have a half mind to go over there and say, can you go fuck my husband so he gets off my ass about sex? I'm like, ding, ding, ding. So had we stayed together, we wouldn't have. But had we stayed together, we would have opened things up. But I could have done that, 9 years before I did it. So all these errors and all these problems are 100% my fault. They weren't hers. They were mine. So be aware of that. Those of you who have gone through divorces or big breakups, wasn't her fault. I don't care what she did. Your fault. You didn't have to marry her. You have to move in with her, okay? That was your decision 100%. No one forced you at gunpoint to marry that woman or have kids with that woman or stay with that woman for 5 years or 10 years or 50 years or 20 years. You fucking did that. Take ownership. And you'll notice the way in which I discuss these topics. Old women I've dated or my ex-wife, things like that. It's not like, that fucking bitch got... I never talk like that, ever, because it's my fault. I did it. So there you go. That's it. You want me to continue on this series of my experiences as a beta male when I was a younger man? Please let me know, and I can certainly add to this morbid collection down memory lane before my conversion to Alpha Male 2.0 when I was 33 years old after my divorce. Cool. All right. See you next podcast. Bye.